He was not born in darkness. He was carved from light, from nobility, from the kind of honor that once echoed through the marble halls of Sereno. He stood in the Jedi Temple not as a soldier, but as a seeker, a man of precision, of elegance, of purpose. Before the wars, before the cloak of Tyrannus, there was Count Dooku. He saw through the cracks in silence. He heard the lies behind their order. He watched the Republic decay behind golden speeches and smiling traitors. And when he spoke, they labeled him disloyal. When he questioned, they labeled him dangerous. But in truth, he was only asking what no one else dared to whisper. To them, he became the villain, the fallen master who traded robes for shadows, a traitor wrapped in crimson and secrecy. But to himself, he was still a guardian, still a protector of something higher. He believed the Jedi lost their way. He believed the only way forward was to step outside the lines they drew in fear. There is no tragedy more haunting than a man who saw the future and was ignored. No fate more bitter than one who tried to save the galaxy and was condemned by it. He was not consumed by power. He was consumed by loneliness, by the weight of truth carried on one man's shoulders. And yet, even as he stood beside Sidious, even as he raised a saber against the very order that raised him, there was always something restrained in him. He fought with control, not chaos. He ruled with conviction, not hatred. He was never lost. He was left behind. In this video, we explore the rise and fall of Count Dooku, the noble Jedi who became a Sith not out of greed, but out of grief. We examined how he saw the system crumble long before the Clone Wars began, how he believed he could fix it from within the shadows, and how that belief became the very blade that ended him. He was once a Jedi, not just any Jedi, but a master of elegance, wisdom, and unshaken poise. His voice carried weight in every chamber. His presence cast calm over conflict. Before the name Dooku became a whisper of fear, it was a name of pride. He walked among the greatest, sparred with legends, debated with senators, and studied the fault lines of the galaxy. He saw things others missed, heard truths buried under protocol and peacekeeping. Dooku wasn't restless. He was awakening. The cracks in the Republic weren't invisible. They were ignored, smoothed over by tradition and bureaucracy. But he looked closer, saw the rot beneath the gold, the corruption feeding on power like a parasite with no end. Was it so wrong to ask why the Jedi served the Senate instead of the people? Was it betrayal to challenge the very council that taught him to question? Or was it faith in a higher truth, a deeper purpose, a nobler calling that required sacrifice? Before he turned away, before he took the name Tyrannus, Count Dooku believed in change, not conquest, not cruelty, just a better way, a path the others refused to see. They called him traitor, heretic, a Sith cloaked in lies. But no one asked why he left. No one listened to the warnings he carved into every word. They dismissed him as fallen before they understood he was trying to rise. The Jedi were supposed to be protectors, but they became pawns, not of darkness, but of order so rigid it broke beneath its own weight. Dooku didn't abandon his duty. He saw it being twisted, and when he spoke against it, they closed their ears. He watched as systems were bought with promises, watched as greed replaced justice. He stood in rooms filled with power and heard nothing but silence where there should have been compassion. His voice echoed back, unanswered, so he walked away. But they made it easy to hate him, wrapped him in shadows, and gave him a new name, Tyrannus, as if that erased the man underneath. As if that stripped away the ideals that once burned bright within him. They needed a villain, so they made one. The truth was never convenient, and Dooku's truth was an inconvenient storm, a storm the Republic ignored, a storm the Jedi feared, a storm that might have saved them if they had let it in. He didn't fall. He drifted, slowly, quietly, like a candle flickering in wind that no one tried to shield. His eyes still held conviction, but his path became darker with each step away from the temple. His apprentice was lost. Qui-Gon was more than a student. He was a son, a kindred flame who believed in listening, in questioning, in balance. And when Qui-Gon died, a piece of Dooku shattered, not in rage, but in grief. That grief calcified into resolve. He saw the Sith rising and the Jedi frozen, and in that vacuum he made a choice. A choice not born of hunger for control, but of desperation to rewrite a broken future. He stood beside Sidious, not because he believed in tyranny, but because he believed he could outplay it, manipulate the darkness to defeat a greater evil. But the darkness was not a tool, it was a tide, and it swallowed him in silence. Dooku didn't scream when he lost himself, he whispered. And in that whisper was everything he once stood for, everything he tried to preserve, everything he failed to protect. Even in shadow, Count Dooku remained regal, his words precise, his blade graceful. There was poetry in his movements, a discipline forged not in rage, but in control, in a belief that even war could be conducted with dignity. He wasn't like the others. He didn't strike from chaos. He fought with purpose. Every gesture was calculated. Every threat veiled in intellect. He didn't seek destruction. He demanded order. Even as the galaxy burned around him, he became the face of a revolution, a confederacy born from systems tired of lies, planets abandoned by the very republic they were meant to trust. And though the cause was corrupted, the spark at its heart was real. Dooku didn't want dominance. He wanted clarity. In a galaxy clouded by propaganda and fear, he offered sharpness, a mirror to power's decay. And while that mirror was flawed, it still reflected a truth many refused to see. There was beauty in his downfall, not because it was right, but because it revealed how even the purest intentions can be twisted, how even the most disciplined soul can be undone by the weight of trying to fix what no one else would touch. What if he had been heard? What if Qui-Gon had lived? What if the Jedi had stepped back and seen what he saw? There is hope in these questions, because they remind us that the fall was not inevitable, it was preventable. His warnings weren't whispers in the dark. They were flares begging for someone to follow. Dooku wasn't the warning, he was the signal. The one who shouted before the fire consumed the temple, before clones marched and sabers turned cold. He stood at the edge of darkness, not because he wanted to jump, but because no one else dared to look. His vision wasn't clouded. It was too clear for others to face. And yet, within his failure lies a lesson. That change must be embraced before it becomes a weapon. That those who speak against the system are not always rebels. Sometimes they are prophets. Sometimes they are right. He showed that silence in power is louder than the cries for help beneath it. There were moments he could have turned back, but pride and isolation locked him in. Still, the memory of what he tried to do can guide others, can remind future generations that dissent is not disloyalty, it is survival. Even in defeat, he planted the seed of rebellion that would later bloom. Dooku's story is not a blueprint for destruction. It is a map of missed chances, a tale of vision without support. And that means there is still time. Time to build what he once believed could exist. If we remember his rise as much as his fall, then maybe his dream doesn't have to die with him. In the end, he died a servant to the very force he tried to resist. A pawn discarded by a master who never saw him as anything else. He died in silence, in betrayal. In the cold realization that he was never the architect, only the instrument. His final breath carried no vengeance, only understanding. No trial, no redemption, no legacy, just a moment. A flick of a saber, and a life extinguished with barely a word. The galaxy moved on, the war raged on, and no one paused to mourn the man who once stood above them all. His death was clean, but the consequences remained jagged and deep. But Count Dooku was not evil. He was broken, misguided, isolated by his own brilliance. He saw a future collapsing, and tried to hold it up alone. And in doing so, he lost everything. His tragedy was not in turning, but in believing he could stand alone and still save the world. His name became synonymous with villainy, but it should have been remembered with complexity, with nuance, with the understanding that not every fall is a choice. Sometimes, it's the only path left when all others are closed. His fall was not corruption, it was abandonment. And so we remember him not as tyrannous, not as a Sith, but as a man who dared to see the truth, and paid the price for it in silence. In shadows, and in the forgotten pages of a broken republic, maybe his story is not a warning, but a mirror held up to every system too proud to listen.